I'm trying to coexist, exist. Yeah, I'm trying to coexist, exist. I'm trying to coexist.
From childhood curiosity to paying thousands of dollars in debt during a pandemic, how does a passion for science translate into a blueprint for a better life? Today, we're talking about the discipline it takes to overcome academic failure and the grit required to find peace in the midst of chaos. Welcome to the Ethics podcast, where we explore human experiences. Today we are joined by Zakee Conte Smith, a clinical laboratory scientist who turned a lifelong fascination with the natural world into a career on the front lines of history. Zakee's journey wasn't a straight line. It was built on a foundation of parental guidance, tested in the high-pressure crucible of the COVID-19 pandemic, and fueled by a commitment to educational advocacy. We are going to explore how the lab bench became a place of personal transformation, not only leading into leadership, but also into financial freedom, professional resilience, and a deep understanding of the hidden systems that run our lives, from virology to bacteria. We will be also discussing how to navigate through a world of misinformation, the importance of emotional regulation, and why a lack of purpose is as dangerous as any virus, and also what is our responsibility to find goals, purpose, and peace of mind. But before we begin, we want to put the mirror on you and ask you the following. What was your childhood passion, and were you able to grow in it? Perhaps could it be time to rediscover it? And if you lost hope on this dream, how can you reconnect with it and make it possible to dream and make this passion tangible? This is what we're going to be discussing at the Ethical Podcast. To support this podcast, please subscribe, comment, like, and more importantly, together we grow and learn more. Let's start. Welcome to the Ethics Podcast, where we explore human experiences. We have an incredible human being with us, a leader and a scientist. His name is Zakee Conte Smith. Let him tell us a little bit more about his personality, his vision, his leadership, but also what he wants to see in the future. Zakee, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about you. Like, where did this desire to become a scientist started?
Well, thank you, Wendell. Well, for me, I've always loved loved science ever since I was a kid. I've always loved experiments. I loved the theory, especially like biology and stuff like that. So pretty much there was a pivotal moment in my life where it's like I envisioned it. It was like in the 7th grade. It was like our art teacher asked us all, where do you see yourselves in like 10 years from now? And this was back 07, 08. Well, I envisioned myself in a laboratory. I saw a centrifuge. I saw test tubes, big computer. I created that picture, and I still have that picture in my house to this day as a physical reminder of like where the spark came from. And like originally, and even after I went out of high school, I still loved science, but I wanted to transition to it a little bit differently. So I thought to myself, I would become like a pharmacist, would deal with drugs and be able to create treatments for people, especially for like neurological diseases. I'm still working on that into the future. So but sometimes life can give you a transitional kick where you thought you knew exactly where you were going, and then it pivots you into another direction. So like when I first started college at St. Peter's University in Jersey City, New Jersey, originally my mom told me like, just focus in school, don't do nothing else, just focus on that. I noticed the biology department lab in there. I was like, I was so fascinated with the whole lab environment. And even at that point, I love science, but I was never in a real laboratory. I've never been, but then when I saw it, I was like, I had to figure out what it was. I had to be in there. So I asked my seminar college professor, like, what is that? And how do I get into it? You would have to speak to the person in charge of that. So I did. I set up an interview with him and his lead worker there. Him and her pretty much sat me down and asked me questions. And prior, I had no real scientific experience other than me working at the North Museum as a science explorer, where I would teach little kids science experiments to kids and their family. That's the only experience in science I really had. So I showcased that a little bit and I used that and I went about and go into there. In that instance, that's how I started working in the bio work study program at my school for 4 years. And mind you, at that time, they never allowed freshmen to work in the work study.
Oh, wow.
They would never let anyone work there because you had to be at least a junior or senior, because a lot of them, they needed that for that you had some form of lab work experience. So they applied for medical school. So I pretty much, in their history, I was like the first freshman to work in the work study at the school. So pretty much they had me started first off reorganizing, cleaning beakers and flasks. Then I started making media that we used to grow bacteria. Then I started setting things up, and to the point where I got into a leadership position, pretty much almost second in command at the work study lab to organize. I was a microorganism stock manager.
What do you think these lab leaders saw in you that convinced them that you were the right person to
continue?
Yeah, to give you, not only teach you the basics and walk you through, but also mentor you.
Well, I guess for me, I feel like I had a spark in me and such a vivid interest in the lab work, because a lot of times when students come in, they're doing it because they're trying to get credit, and the teachers and the leaders, they know that already. They already know what you're really here for. But to see a freshman who's just coming into school, who thinks they know what they want, but they really don't, to come there and ask them like, oh, okay, you seem interesting. We'll give you a shot, see how this goes. And because my work ethic was so diligent, I was very meticulous. I was always on time. I was always early. I was able to help whatever project we had to do. They saw that and they gave me more and more responsibilities as time went on. And even it got to a point where I was so well respected and trusted that even the teacher referred to me when my boss wasn't there. They would ask me what to do. They would ask me how to do things, especially with
you earned that trust then.
Yes. And that's another thing too. Trust has to be earned. You have to work at it. It can't just be given to you automatic. Same with respect. Yeah, there's a difference between having respect and having common decency for your fellow man and woman. Everyone should you got to give people common decency. But respect, you have to earn that over time and time again.
That's so interesting, because they definitely saw something in you that they said, well, this deserves to be polished. And something you also said before going to the lab was also your mother believing that you had to study, that was the way. What was your parents' influence towards the career you chose later on?
Well, she never, my mother, she was loving, but also stern and a little bit strict too, because she wanted me to really build and cultivate what I am today, because she also understands, you have to remember, as a minority and as a Black man, it's hard for the world to really take you serious. So you had to be able to build yourself and be able to exert that level of respectability, confidence, assertiveness, to the point where anyone will take you serious in a room where pretty much you'll be able to garner a level of respectability. And she gave it to me, and that's what molded me into what I am today. And she was also present in every of my iteration, because I remember the days where she would sit down with me when I would do science experiments and create science projects. She would help me build those up until a point where I gained the knowledge and confidence to do it on my own. But you have to cultivate that in the early stages, and you cannot expect someone to just get it late in the game and think oh, you're at a certain point now, you should just know it. No, that things like that, they have to be nurtured. Nature can build it up, it can start it off, but something has to nurture that in order to grow. Is a balance with that. But this is the thing that's where I had to make a hard decision. And because even into my career at the work study at St. Peter's, something had to change. Because originally I was going there for biochemistry to become the pharmacist and everything. But this is where things took a turn. This was sophomore year, fall semester, 2014 going into 2015. This was by far, and these are two classes that changed the way I saw myself and pivoted to where I am at today. Differential calculus and chemistry 2. Now, differential calculus and Chem 2, those are two of the hardest classes I have ever taken. Now, I'm not taking differential calculus every morning at 8 o'clock, every single day, except Tuesday, but you're still constantly studying it every single day. I passed, but it was with a C-. And my advisor emailed me, and I asked him yo, sit down, we need to have a meeting and talk. He looked me dead in my face and said to me, look, at the rate you're going, you're not going to graduate out here in 4 years. And even if you do graduate, the likelihood of you just having a degree in biochemistry, just having a degree alone, is not going to land you the job that you're looking for. So that was the meanest reality check I got. So I didn't even realize how far behind I was, because I had to take certain math courses and certain science courses already into my sophomore year, and I just barely gotten to the first level of math. So, and I was already struggling that. At the rate I was going, there was no way I was going to be able to finish. And he was right. So this is where he made the suggestion. Okay, why don't we try something else? Go apply for a program, still be in biology, going for biology, but as a double major for another one called clinical laboratory science. It focused on you being in the lab because he already saw me in the lab every day. So I thought, let's utilize the skills that you actually have and cultivate that to something much bigger, because people don't realize it. Medical laboratory scientists, it's a good job, especially something to start off right after college. And it's like a trade. It will never go out of business. There are always going to be people there. People are going to always need people in the lab to do the tests that most people don't realize. And you can take that in any hospital, in any state in the United States. You can literally go anywhere. And I'll go into that a little bit later. So I had switched to clinical laboratory science, and I started busting down, taking all the classes I needed, and I was doing well in them. And then I realized I was so far behind in science classes. That's when I had to take Chem 2. But at that point, they can only offer it during the fall. So one of the teachers suggested you take a tutorial class where pretty much they cram 3 months of material into 3 weeks. Yeah. So imagine doing that during the summer.
That's brutal. And I'm curious to know what made these two topics so difficult. And you obviously had good counseling, because they saw not only the opportunity for growth and what you needed to progress, but they also saw your ability beyond the theory, because they saw you in a practical setting as well. Mm-hmm. How did these two things change your life? The good counseling and the fact that you were facing really big adversity with these two topics. But I want to know what made it so difficult.
Oh, yeah, let me say right now, because differential calculus and chemistry too, they are some of the most dense materials that you'll ever get in a mathematics or science course, because you're learning all the theories and practicalities. Pretty much they help build the foundation for all the other stuff that you'll learn in the big fields in medical school or in the actual working environment. Without the fundamental knowledge of that, you can't learn any of the others. So I had to learn all that. And imagine condensing all that in a small period. That's hard. Because during the summer, and there's a lot of teachers won't do tutorial classes unless it's really needed. So, but here's the thing, only 4 students, including myself, were able to take the class. Only 4. I was the only one who passed.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow. So how did you prepare yourself to not only understand all these basic theories, fundamental theory, but also what was your commitment to yourself?
Oh, I wanted to be a scientist. And also, I didn't want to support my mom. And also, I just wanted this dream, but also I had support. And I had to humble myself to realize I'm not the smartest person in the room. And that's, to me, this is the thing that we can also touch into, especially with men, sometimes you have to be able to humble yourself to realize you're not going to be the best in your area. So you're going to need help. So I had a friend who worked in the work study center. She helped me every single day. I went to her every single day. She helped me out with that every single day with the class. And that's how I was able to pass. But also because I worked hard and I studied every day and every chance I got. I had to maintain that. I couldn't lose that. Otherwise, I was going to fall behind.
So you had a laser focus and
yes.
getting, but that's amazing to understand that we all need help at some point. So as you were diving into these more complex materials, what did you discover in yourself of your own capability?
What I discovered was basically, okay, I can handle the work. It's a lot. It is a lot. Don't get me wrong. It is, but I knew I could handle the workload if I just maintained what I was doing and just ask for help whenever I needed. Because if not, I was going to just fall apart. If I didn't, I needed to know how to ask for help and maintain that and ask questions. Don't just leave things unannounced, things like, oh, I got this. No. And especially when you don't really know this. You got to be able to accept help and also gain ideas from other people who may not be in the same background as you, but they can help fill in the gaps and things that you may not have noticed. Mm-hmm. And that's what helped. And that's another thing that helped me out tremendously. That's like, I have to be able to do that. And most people don't know how to do that.
Yeah. And accepting help and asking for help is perhaps exposing a vulnerability of ours, of a certain level of good ignorance, correct?
Exactly.
And the curiosity also to seek help. Let me ask you another question. I'm actually fascinated by your walk into the science world. Is as you were curious and seeking help, what was the best, because it seems like you found a rhythm at some point and you organize yourself within that rhythm. How did you start to understand the best way for you to learn and communicate these different advices that you needed from others?
Well, I learned from my own mistakes and also own failures too, because like in the beginning, I'm thinking, oh, I'm smart, I can handle this stuff and this happens in anything I go into new. I think I'm good. And then say you have an examination or the first trial and I bomb it miserably. That is like the wake up call. You really, but it helps you. You have to be humble enough to let you see and not let it discourage you. And you need a strong foundation, obviously, too. You need to be able to see like, okay, this is where I was struggling at. Let me see where I can fill in the blanks and fix what I need to fix in order to really grow from that. And that's something that every man and every woman should take with them every single day. Just because you mess up doesn't mean you're a failure. We all mess up. That is a fact of life that you're going to mess up at some point. That is a fact of life that you just cannot avoid. You cannot avoid that. Failure becomes the blueprint for success because it allows you to see where the problems lie and then you can improve on them. No one's going to be perfect, but there's always room for growth and improvement. And that's how I was able to take that and build off of it too. And with that, I was able to graduate both with biology and a clinical science degree. And this is where the journey gets more interesting.
Yeah, I see that after that, you pursue your master's at Rutgers, correct?
No, actually, this is when I went to the other school because this was a joint program with St. Peter's University and Rutgers North for clinical laboratory science, because this is a career that most people don't even really know about unless you start asking, or because like, it's a small community, but it has a big impact, especially in the healthcare world. Because again, what a medical laboratory scientist does, they are the ones who do the diagnostics testing on patient samples, whereas it's blood, urines, plasma, all that stuff. And they give a pre-diagnosis result to the doctors to let them know what's going on with them. Because without medical laboratory scientists, basically your doctor would just be guessing what you have based on what you tell them. And like you can really only go so far because there's so many things that can be wrong with you just off of very, very vague descriptions of what you describe. So I did that after I graduated. Only a week later, I was in the medical laboratory science program at Rutgers North. And I was there. It was a 15-month program that I participated in, and it functioned like a miniature med school. And it would break down all the 5 main categories of medical laboratory science that I would need to learn in order to pursue this career. It was chemistry, hematology, blood bank, microbiology, and laboratory like you could say informatics, then also like computation, laboratory mathematics, like mechanicalization. We'll go into that later on.
Yeah, so your career requires precision.
Yes, especially
how do you deal with that? I would say the stress of knowing that you have to leave very minimal mistakes.
Oh, I loved it. I thrived in like people say like, oh, I'm very stressful. Yeah, it can be stressful, but after I learned something, oh, I thrive in it and I love it. Especially when it comes to science, I loved it because it explored so many different aspects of science that I love that I could truly grow in it, and I can actually just learn and cultivate with it too. Because like, here's an example: chemistry, you have to be very analytical. You have to be very precise in pretty much in the values that you give, and especially with say for your BMP panel, like basic metabolic panels, whether it's like for your lipids, your lipids, cholesterol, glucose level, sodium level, that they had to be very precise. You couldn't go off with that. Whereas in like say something like hematology, you have to be more observational, and like you have to notice certain patterns to see what's going on, and you have to notice certain characteristics within cells to see whether or not something is amiss or not. With blood bank and chemistry are the most analytical ones where you have to be precise because you can cost someone in their life, especially blood bank. You have to know what blood type that person has in order to transfuse them, especially if they're in the ER. And you have to pretty much find the right type of antibodies that match that blood precisely. Otherwise, you'll end up causing a severe allergic reaction to the patient because you're giving them the wrong type of antibodies that they will cause a severe reaction to. Microbiology is more interesting to me because like it's a puzzle game, but it's also memorization too. Once you figure out the ingredients for certain augurs and also what characteristics that a bacteria can grow in a certain environment, you'll know automatically what it is. Then you have viruses, fungi, protozoas, and all that, parasites. That's very interesting too. Laboratory mathematics, that falls in line with the QC data and everything. The quality control to see whether or not your instruments, your analyzers are working properly. And what's interesting about a career too, you can branch off and actually be the people that helped build the analyzers and sell them too, and train people how to do it. I've been offered many times to be a trained specialist to actually train other people how to use these analyzers too. And the thing about this career, you can travel across the states to actually train people how to use these analyzers, and the company pays for your travels.
That's interesting. So what is it that you love so much about microbiology? What is it that fascinates you?
It's a puzzle game. You have to figure out, okay, so now say if a patient brings in a certain piece from like your finger or blood culture, or you get a urine culture. So you have to figure out the patterns of the like in the agar. Pretty much that's like a gelatin media that the bacteria grows in, because it gives them the nutrients they need to grow. Now some bacteria, they grow in an aerobic where it needs oxygen to survive. Some don't need oxygen at all. Others, they need certain conditions, certain material, to grow in and cultivate. So like it's a mixed match puzzle game. I like puzzles. It allows you to figure out what it is. But I work in hematology, and I also love observational skill. And in hematology, you have to be observational. You have to notice patterns.
So you study the behaviors of these microorganisms.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something, because I don't know if I know that super bacteria are out there. Have you ever encountered one?
Not me per se, but we've had cases where people have dealt with MRSA, and we've also dealt with like severe Staph aureus resistant bacteria too, especially in our hospital and also parts of my field in internships. I've seen that, but the major thing I've dealt with the most, but mainly in my field, was hematology. The main thing I've dealt with the most, and this wasn't a bacteria but was a virus, was COVID.
Well, this is so interesting to understand what your field embarks. So 2 questions. What is MRSA, and what did your life look like during the COVID era?
Ooh. Okay. First off, MRSA was the methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus infection. That's basically a Staph aureus infection or bacteria that after a while they become resistant to the methicillin antibiotic. To the point was like you've been inoculated with it so many times, now it's developed a resistance towards it, and now it becomes much easier for it to spread and proliferate. And pretty much most antibiotics now won't really work on it now. And that's basically what it is. And that's a little bit harder to deal with now, especially now with the rise of antibiotic resistant bacteria. But with COVID, that was also another transitional period in my life too, because I only was really at the job for like at most a year and a half or 2 years. And then when COVID hit, it hit us hard. Like I've never seen so many patients come in and out that hospital when we had the mask implementation. Like everyone was wearing masks. We had coworkers who would battle, didn't want to wear a mask or not. Some of them lost their family members, their friends, mainly a lot of older people too. And then the drove of specimens that we would get in blood gas and coagulation to see whether or not people, because like when you had the COVID infection, you were more likely to also develop a stroke too. So we would see a lot more patients in, like they would be thousands. Because when you work in a big hospital, you already get thousands already, but it's tripling that.
What do you think provoked the strokes when people that had COVID?
Say when you couldn't breathe properly too, pretty much you're accessing your blood pressure up higher and higher to the point where it makes it much more difficult to breathe. It's more likely for you to develop a stroke later on, and for blood to not properly flow and to build up cells and within certain arteries and veins too, you're going to more likely develop a stroke. And that was
a common symptom then.
Yeah. So pretty much COVID was another pre-factor for that too. And also you would see a lot of your white blood cells increase massively because you're fighting a viral infection that is unknown, that it can't really deal with. And imagine it being able to bypass that too. So
that your body immune system is producing the right mechanism, but it doesn't know how to attack the invader. It doesn't recognize it.
Well, yeah, that's with any infection too. But with this one, it was very tricky, especially because like viruses aren't natural, but COVID was a very particular case too. Like it was
What made it particular?
Hmm?
What made COVID so particular? Was it a unique virus? Do you think it was genetically done, or was it natural?
Well,
You
we
know,
don't, and that's the thing. There's so many theories of how it might have been lab grown, how it came from maybe bats or something, and it just spread like that. It was like there's so many theories that we can't really nail down with, without also causing a lot of strife within the medical community as well, too. But I'll tell you one thing about it: COVID was very unexpected, and it was a slow buildup. It was a slow buildup that we kind of saw happen, but we didn't really tackle it like the way we should have until it got so big where when it affected a whole continent, a whole country, that's when it was like, okay, now this is a big threat. Now the whole world is on alert for this. That's when it became serious. And like, that's when it started affecting our life. I remember someday, and since I work in New York, like New York is always bustling and moving. So I will remember days when I would get dropped off, when I would get off the bus sometime or the train, Times Square, Port Authority would look like a ghost town. There'd be barely anyone there. I remember during that trip, I remember certain shops and stores. I remember there was like a pizza place that was by the Port Authority. I remember Mexican restaurants and all that stuff. Certain stores, they shut down because of COVID. Majority, unless you were essential, they were shut down. They could not make business. And even after COVID ended, most of them never came back. They were gone. Now, COVID didn't just mess people physically. It messed with society, like economically, psychologically. Like it changed our whole lives.
how you dealt with the work overload of COVID, and I see that your work is almost like the operational manager for doctors. So how was the communication during that time as well with your doctor?
It was very difficult because like sometimes you would have to call. We would also call doctors for criticals, redraws. Let's say if a specimen wasn't right, and they're already stressed out, so pretty much we would deal with not just reluctant doctors, but angry doctors and nurses, because like they were just as much stressed out, and I can only imagine how they feel. We're in a lab. We just mainly see each other and specimen. Imagine them and nurses seeing bodies getting put into trucks. So many friends, family, senior citizens dying, especially by themselves, because they can't interact with patients because like the risk of spreading the virus was so lethal. It was that bad. So that took a psychological toll on so many people. So like I feel for them. Like the communication was hard, but like it was understandable. Like we just had to get what we had to do. But we relayed important information that they needed in order to progress and what they needed to do. It was a very, very tough transition.
How did you dealt with your mental health during these times? What are the coping mechanisms you put yourself into?
I had to talk with certain friends. I had to keep myself busy. I tried different activities too to try to get to do that too. And that was also the two things that happened. When COVID really hit, that's also when I switched from evening shift to night shift. And that's around the same time when I went back to school for my master's. So going to school for my master's and also during this period was a great distraction because I could focus on this and work and nothing else.
Yeah, and I believe you make the right choice because anxiety hates a busy mind, and you kept yourself always, your mind capturing new data, new information, new experiences. You didn't let it evolve into any sort of anxiety disorder or emotional disorder. This is so fascinating because COVID reminded me of war.
Yeah.
The chaos of war, myself being a war veteran. You saw kind of the same paradox, but in a different setting in the hospital system, especially when it collapsed so quickly. Let me ask you this. What have this experience taught you? Because we should not take for granted not only your level of education, how smart and brilliant you are, but also now you have this also as a personal title under your belt of dealing with a pandemic of this magnitude. What have that taught you, and how is this experience so fundamental if, let's say, a new pandemic hits the world?
Oh, this is a great question. Okay. So there's like 5 instances where it's like the COVID pandemic really changed me. One, it changed me physically because when I first started the job and also during that transition of the pandemic, like originally I was like very skinny, but like when you're stressed, when you're in a stressful environment and you're constantly worrying about going in and out, when you don't have time to prepare, I would just snack a lot. I would just eat I would stress eat a lot to the point was like I got big and big, but it wasn't a healthy big. And this was also the period where it was like, okay, I started, my sugar level was a little bit high. My cholesterol level wasn't really good. So like, it made me see like how when you're in a stressful environment like that during that transitional period, it will take a toll on your health and you won't even realize it until it starts affecting you. And that's when I started working out more and started being more physically active. But then also there was a case where I had a hemorrhoid. I ended up developing hemorrhoids because of my poor diet and lack of exercise. So I was like, now I had to develop not only a better lifestyle where being more physically active, but being more mindful when I eat. That was one aspect. The psychological toll, like it made me realize how much life changed. And when you see all your loved ones impacted by this too, and how it pretty much, it separates you to the point where like you can't even interact. And people didn't realize that not being able to see your loved ones for a certain period of time, and whether or not you didn't know if you were ever going to see them again, it takes a psychological toll. And it took one on me too, because I didn't know if I was going to see my friends. I didn't know when I was going to be able to meet new people. I was just stuck in a small section of the world, and I had to maintain that for 2 to 3 years in order to survive that. Then I realized also for me, but this was also a personal anecdote, but it's also a good one. But it's also a reflection too, was economically, because around this time period too, for people during COVID, it was a best and worst time because people couldn't afford to really go anywhere, or they had no health insurance to pay for not only to get themselves better for the medication, or if you died, or if a loved one died, you couldn't pay for their funerals. You couldn't do any of that stuff. And this was also a time where the presidency, where they implemented 0% interest on student loans or even loans in general, because like people couldn't pay them, especially if you couldn't work. People were out of jobs. People couldn't support themselves or their families. Bills were piling up. Credit, people had to rely on credit to even just to survive. It was a window to the world and also to the medical field too, because like how the COVID pandemic affected them, it damn near almost collapsed the entire medical field, because like the massive pile of people that were coming in every single day, the stress, we were losing more people, not only in doctors and nurses, but also even people in my field too. People were getting burned out. They were getting harassed. They were getting stressed out. And even people who were traveling nurses and traveling technologists, they were getting burnt out because the workload and the stress and the psychological toll, it just took a toll on them financially, to the point was like they could barely keep up no matter how many hours they worked and everything. But it was also a window of opportunity that I took, because I was able to see this, because during that time period, I had a little bit of credit card debt, but I had a lot of student loan debts from St. Peter's and Rutgers too. And also going to school too. I had over $100,000 in student loan debt when I first started at my job in 2018. So pretty much, and during the COVID time, this was a golden opportunity for me. So pretty much while I was working, every week or every 2 weeks, I would put money in to my student loans for St. Peter's and Rutgers. Every single time, I would double the initial payment that I had every time I would get paid. That way it would slowly break down. And also my mom's loan, because she also put in a Parent Plus loan for me to go to school. I not only cleaned up my loan, but hers as well. And within 3 years, because like, it was just a month ago, I celebrated the 4th year. It's been 4 years since I've been student loan debt free, and that's an impact for you, because a lot of young people, that's why a lot of young people around my age or younger, they can't make milestone movements in their life. Like they can't afford their own first car. They can't afford an apartment or a house. They can't build a family. They can't move anywhere. They can't change jobs, because a lot of times you stay in these uncomfortable, toxic environments because you can't afford it. You can't go anywhere else. So now you're stuck in these environments for longer than you had anticipated. So that window of opportunity that I had in the economic space, I used that as a way to get myself out of debt and build up enough money where it's like, when I'm ready to make the big leap, I already have a cushion where if I needed to switch jobs or switch locations, I can do that. And COVID also tested people's morality. It made people question themselves and made people question who they spend their time with, who they worked with, and how they saw themselves, like I ain't worried about other people. It's like, I'm just worried about me. I was like, no, people need help and all this stuff. COVID really opened your eyes to see how people really thought about other people. And it's like, if they were in these situations, it allowed them to see what they would do in these situations. And it was very telling. And politically too. Politically wise, when you saw people with political views and how they were staunchly against or for something, it really gave you an eye-opening view of who they really were as a person. And those were the 5 factors how COVID really affected me.
Yeah, you hit it on the nail. I'm a big believer that stress and pressure really showcases who you really are when it matters the most. And it's not only about the ethical and moral convictions that you have, but it's more important is the decisions you make. If you remember, I remember people trying to buy hand sanitizers by the pound, reselling them. The same thing with toilet paper. So this puts into perspective that is not a vast majority. It's a small minority that wants to take advantage of the mass majority. And this is, to you, it's critical because think about it. You have to have a high ethics and moral to want to put yourself on the line first, right? Let's look at it. At hospitals at that time were like a war zone.
Exactly.
You were there battling every day. And even though you were burnt out, you knew that if you didn't do your job, somebody relied on these test results that needed to be done at a high level and with precision. And you did that. And not only that you did this moral good deed, but at the same time, you were able to take this opportunity to get yourself out of debt, because that's also one of the biggest factors of why Americans are so stressed. That's why one of the biggest reasons why our cortisol levels are high, because of our finances. And I'm very happy you make this decision for yourself, because it was a very healthy decision and a healthy boundary to free yourself from, I would say, the enslavement of being in debt. Because there's a difference between being in debt and having an investment. Your school loan was an investment, but it was a high price to pay for the education. I wanted to ask you this, since we're going in and delving into this. What are your thoughts about one day the United States being where college is completely free for everyone? Because if education has such a high price to pay, many would doubt to go in because they will be scared of accruing such a debt. What are your thoughts about this topic?
Well, for me, as like college, higher education in the beginning, like most things, it was used as a status symbol. If you went, like, people use going to college as a status to be able to mingle amongst the higher ups or the elites, to be able to get into certain rooms and network certain people that you normally couldn't do if you just worked a regular 9-to-5 job and everything. But like, as you delve deeper and as our society started to progress more and more, it was more apparent that college opened not only just for like the higher ups for the elite, but it was also a networking chain for other fields in the world, whether it's the medical field, political world, engineering, the social justice worlds, and the athletics too. It's like, and the psychic world. It opens you to places that you would have never saw if you were just working your regular 9-to-5 in your regular hometown. You never went anywhere else. College is very important because it opens you to a field that you would have never saw before. It allows you to network with people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different languages, and different walks of life that you would have never saw had you just stayed in your regular hometown. And that's very vital. And I feel like now, because we just pushed it now, especially when you put more money into these colleges, unfortunately, college has now become the equivalent of almost getting a high school diploma. It was like, now people's expected, especially when you come from a foreign country where it was almost impossible for you to get higher education. So when you come over to the United States, like, the first thing you want your kids to do is go to college, get that degree, and be a doctor, a nurse, a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, to make that big buck, because it gets you. For a lot of people, when you're coming out of those countries, it was their main goal was getting out of poverty, and also just to open a window that I could never get you anywhere before, to really be able to grow and prosper and live the dream that I never could. But as time goes on and progress, especially now when you mix politics into the educational system, now college has become almost like a breeding ground for these political agendas where people can use your mindset, especially young impressionable minds, against you. They use you as pawns to the point where it feeds their agenda, and they'll go for it every bout. And when you don't fall in line with certain agendas, now guess what happens? Certain governments or state officials start taking funding away from these schools to the point where like now certain aid programs, certain beneficial educational program that you use, or like financial programs that would help low income students actually get themselves to get through school when they never had money to pay for it themselves. When they start taking away, that's where it gets a little bit tricky now. And now we're starting people now on, especially in the online world, where they're now starting to talk about two different things, trying to thrive more in the social media diaspora, where they're trying to grow there. Because let's be honest, the internet has become the ultimate equalizer, where now it's like anyone can find a way to make monies in any aspect of the world. You just got to be able to know, you got to be able to have a conversation, talk on the phone, do what we're doing, and just be able to branch out like that and just grow from there. But you had to be consistent with it. And also with trade, you remember before trade back then, it was implemented in the school systems for a decade. But around like the 70s, 80s, they started taking those trade programs out of the schools and started replacing them by going to college and everything, because now it was a status symbol. It was a way to get money back into the states, and also for higher ups too. It was a perpetual cycle wheel that you to gain money in, where the systems were getting money, but the people were getting poorer and poorer depending on which field you go into. Let's say, for example, this is an essential job. I feel like people in social services and education, teachers, but they are not getting paid for the high toll work that they're getting tossed around, especially people with need. Like it is ridiculous. So education to me is going to change, but how we're changing it, it's a little bit daunting. It's a little bit daunting. So this is why I feel like people in my generation and younger ones who are in college now need to be able to take a stand and be able to rewrite what's already been going on and not be someone's pawn in a whole game.
I agree with your point of view, because if one thing that provides more stability and a better comprehension of diversity and who we are as a society is having the proper education and the proper resources for the programs that you're talking about. And it's so important too that colleges need to go beyond being a business. And what makes that difference is if we have the proper educational system, but also the competent leaders and competent teachers too. Like, for example, you had an excellent counselor that guided you, that said, I see potential here. Let's take this advantage out of you. And when you have that, I believe that that's what makes a difference. One person makes the difference for another. And once we start understanding the role we play as leaders in society, especially when we acquire more knowledge, is what are we doing with our time to help those that don't have as much knowledge as we do, and the wisdom, right? And it goes hand to hand with advocacy. And I know that, you're big on educational advocacy.
Yes.
How did this whole sentiment and passion started for you?
It started around maybe like 2-3 years ago, when I was even after I graduated from master's. I wanted to do more. I wanted to actually make an impact in my community and the school system, because I even noticed it even within high schools and in colleges too. Like in high schools, a lot of their teachers, they're just passing them through the system to the point where it's like, okay, yeah, you pass. Like they turn them into pass or fails. There's a lot of times students, they're not being challenged. They're not being taken seriously, because you also got behavioral issues going on with students as well that's not being corrected. But that's something with the whole family thing, but that's a whole nother conversation. Then you also have in colleges, it's now with AI being more prolific, especially like say with ChatGPT, Gemini, you have those AI systems basically doing all of your work for you, and you're not learning anything. Yeah, you did the work. You didn't do the work. A computer did the work. And after, teachers will note it when you've been a teacher long enough, students' writing styles, how they write, how they talk, how they pronunciate things, how their sentence structures work. You'll know the difference between if a human made this or if a computer made it. And teachers are also frustrated by this. So like, you're not even trying. And so a lot of teachers end up giving up teaching, because like, you're not even trying. And guess what? Students end up paying for that a decade later when they're in the real world, and pretty much they can't comprehend basic things. Like they don't know how to read, they don't know how to write, they don't know how to do basic arithmetics, they don't know context structure, they don't know how to form a real thought-provoking statement without regurgitating the same thing that they would see something online from somebody else who also made that up or regurgitated from someone else. It's a perpetual cycle that no one's really learning anything. You're just building a whole case of nothing. But in reality, it's like no one's really getting any real knowledge. It's like and also I feel like now, especially in the educational section of the world and with online, we're creating a culture of like pseudoscience or pseudo intellectuals where everyone, if you just sound smart or you put a bunch of big words in a context that sounds alluring, people will think you're like Mark Twain or Albert Einstein. No, you're not. Any real intellectual that challenges you, they're gonna see you right through that fragile logic and break it apart. And then the problem with that is like you built your whole persona, your life around that. And when it's breaking apart, people get agitated very easily. So pretty much you were not a real intellectual. You were just masquerading. And this is where I come in now, was like, I want to show people the value of an education, especially in the science and healthcare careers, because like it's essential. And you don't realize how many people you'll meet, the networking skills. College, it helps you breed your social skills, your networking skills, not just comprehension wise, but also how to interact with different cultures. Some people can just do that naturally. A lot of people can't do that. Most people are just used to sticking to who they know or what is familiar to them. Sometimes people need to be forced in a position where they can actually learn from another perspective, another culture that they may not have realized before that. And that's why here's what thing I do. For the past 2 to 3 years, I've been going to two things I do. I go back to my old high school and my old colleges to do talks and seminars about my experience at St. Peter's, Rutgers, and as a medical laboratory science, and then also at my master's program. I talk about my experience. I talk about my work experience at New York Presbyterian Hospital, how it changed me, how it implemented me, and also the structure of my career. What do I need to do? What you guys can do to gain this career if you really want this, and also show them that there are other healthcare careers available to them if they're not sure. Like, because no offense, people who are in science, not everyone wants to be a doctor. Like, no offense, this is just my personal opinion. People always say, oh, I want to be a doctor. Yeah, most of you are not going to be doctors. I already know it. Because like most of you don't have the mental fortitude to be that. Because med school is a whole different beast. And now that too, the mental toll and the financial toll you end up taking, the average med school graduate comes out of school with $250,000 in debt. So that in the first 10 years, like the first few years of residency, you're just getting your feet wet and you're not really making much money. But when you become established, they actually start making big bucks. But at that point, do you really start tackling your student loans? Or when you start realizing, when you start building a family or something like that, that's when you realize, oh, I make money, but I don't have money. Like I'm not really tackling anything because like I waited so long. And then now as I want to build something, I can't really do that as efficiently because I got all this backward truck stuff that I never dealt with for the past decade or so. So that's another thing too. So I go to seminars, I talk to them about different careers that they are available and what type of mindset you need to develop in order to attain these careers, who you need to talk to and support. And also in my high school, I give $1,000 reward to any students who go for a STEM or healthcare related career, why you want this, and how are you going to use this career to help better your community. I've been doing that for the last 3 years now.
That's incredible because what you're trying to also expose on these speeches is letting them know between the theory and the practice.
Yes.
The wanting, the desire versus pursuing and having a plan. On your LinkedIn page, you have such a beautiful quote about a wish without a plan.
Yeah, a goal without a plan is just a wish. I learned that's in high school, and it's very true. A lot of people walk through life without any real direction. They're just in survivor's mode. They don't know what they really want. They just know enough to keep maintaining. And it's not until they get older that they realize, or if they have kids or something impactful or something forces them to change, that's when they start noticing, like, okay, I need a plan, but I don't really, for like, say, the first 5 to 10 years, or sometimes even 2 to 4 years, that you start to realize, okay, what am I doing? What do I have to do? Like, I've been here at I've been doing this for a certain amount of time, and nothing has changed. What am I doing wrong? Because one, you never cultivated a plan. You didn't know what you really want. You didn't have a support system. And a lot of times people don't, that's why a lot of times people don't really go further, because they don't have a support system. Third, you didn't implement a plan to where you would see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years. Because most people's goals and everything are very short term. It's good to have short term goals, but it's also think about where your life is going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. But that's nothing that schools don't teach you. But this is something families have to teach you. It's like, have lifelong goals that you can see yourself developing in the future. Develop a plan. Now, plans are not going to go according all the time. They're not. That's just life. But have a structured idea of where you're going to go in your life. That way, it's a much easier transition than just getting whiplash through life.
Yeah, and also I believe also being aware that we need to be okay with suffering through the process of change.
Yes.
And aligning ourselves to what are the lessons that are going to make us resilient. Because the whole point of suffering through a process, or getting a win and a loss and vice versa, is that we learn how to be resilient through certain pains, through certain emotion, through sadness. Like, for example, you gave a beautiful example about these how hard chemistry was for you.
Yep.
But yet it gave you a new skill set as much as a foundation of what chemistry looks like.
Yep.
But think about the value of resilience it provided, and how your mindset was able to not only adapt, but also now say, well, we have to continue to strive regardless of how we feel, because at the end of the day, the reward is going to be sweeter because the sacrifice is much harder today. Exactly. And it might be painful, but if we endure enough, we not only will have more muscle brain, but also we will know how to tackle bigger things later on. And you're an example of that on being in the COVID environment. So let me ask you this: when do you notice your resilience was this fundamental tool for your career and your life?
I noticed it because when I had friends, coworkers, and even family members still surprised that I was still working at New York Presbyterian Hospital, because for the longest time I was what you would consider a scaredy cat kid. Whereas I was very provoked, very timid, very shy. And New York is a bustling environment. So coming from straight out of New Jersey, in a small town in Irvington, New Jersey, they were very surprised the fact that I went to there, because most people would have thought I would stay in a local hospital closer to where I live, like say University Hospital or Rapport, North Beck, Israel, or because that's what they thought I was going to end up at. But the fact that I chose NYP, I got in and I stayed there for a longer period. I've been there for 7 years now, and they've seen the transition of who I am as a person. And it's that made me realize the fact that I was still going and going and going. I'm like, okay, all right, this resilience, the work I put in, it really did pay off, because I'm still here. I'm still standing. As my mother always used to say, you're the little engine that could. You may not be the smartest person in the room, but you're the one person in the room that works the hardest. And people notice that.
So they value your intentions and your effort.
Yes.
And this also showcases a chunk of your personality, and also how willingly you are to not only help yourself to provoke evolution, but I'm pretty sure those around you get contagious about the evolution you go through. How have you impacted coworkers, peers in your environment when they see the type of professional and the type of human being you are?
I feel like I make an impact on people to the point how I move and what I say to people, that it really starts to you'll make a slight change that you would have probably never done initially on your own. And it's my mom also used to say too, you're the type of person that people don't want to disappoint, because they see your work ethic, they see your personality. You're not a mean, malicious individual. You don't do so. When you manage to make you upset, that means you know you did something wrong. So people want to be better around you, because that's just your character. But I remember, I don't know if you'll ever see this one day, but I remember when I was doing one of my internships at one of the hospitals I used to do. It was at University Hospital. there is this one of my trainers who was there for like 9 years, and I was training like in hematology. I was doing urines, but I was also researching what I wanted to do for my master's and everything. And she was looking like she was very impressed at the fact that I was going back. I planned on going back to school for my master's and everything. And I was younger than her. She was like, she was a little bit older than me, but she was also so young. But she's been there for 9 years, and she didn't really do much of anything. So I would talk to her every now and then, and it's like, I'm not sure if it did, but I feel like I left a mark on her where it's like it changed her life, because literally after I left, and a couple of months after, like a month or two after I'd left, one of my friends from my program told me, oh, she had left already. She had left, went back home and got married.
What did you say to her?
I just remember like talking about like similar to what we're doing now. Like, what do you want out of your life? Like, where do you see yourself 5 to 10 years from now? Because like you'd be surprised how many people no one has these conversations with. Not their parents, not their friends, not their peers. You'd be very surprised. There's a lot of people that don't have these real thought-provoking conversations with. Most people stay with the same people who have the same mindset as them. And it's like, I feel like I did challenge her to a point where it's like made her think like, what do I really want? Like, do I really want to stay here? She has, it's still in our career, but she switched to a different environment, because the environment, I did like the training, but like the environment was also not cultivating.
Mm. So it was hard to, it's hard to grow in a non-cultivating environment, and also providing opinions, ideas in an environment that you believe your word is not going to transcend, or your idea is not going to transcend, also definitely creates a lot of dismotivation. It definitely creates a lot of, I would say, lack of self-identity, which provokes imposter syndrome most time. Most people at workplaces face a lot of imposter syndrome, although they're competent enough. It's not because of what they believe about themselves, it's also what they see every day and how they're not taking serious at the workplace, and they don't feel relevant. All of these things create a resentfulness, an internal resentfulness in yourself, to yourself, because of the environment. I wanted to ask you this, because you come from Irvington, and how did Irvington shape part of your personality, and what do you learn from the Irvington environment?
Well, for me, I learned, like, even though it's home, I realized there wasn't that many people that wanted to do what I wanted to do. So pretty much I knew that I had to stand out. I had to be different. I had to really grow and cultivate myself, because if not, I would have just been another part of the environment. And it's like, I love my town, but it's like, there's nothing about it that makes it stand out. The only thing that makes it stand out, it's like, it's right next to Newark, Jersey City, Maplewood, East Orange, all that stuff. And it's like, you go straight into the highway to get to New York City. But like, my environment wasn't, it was home, but it didn't really build that. Or sometimes I didn't even see it until I got older, that some people just needed help. So I wanted to be an advocate for the voices that could never speak up for themselves, because I remember what it was like to not speak up for myself.
And this definitely, it's very thoughtful to think about like how different you were in this environment. Where perhaps, and I'm from the Bronx, so I understand what you're saying. It's not like a West Orange or Montclair, city or town where most of the people around that environment are people that have done something with their life. If it's not academically, they have done it at a corporate level, or they're pioneers in different businesses. Talk about everything in the Bronx is a low income meridian city and town, and what you see there is the complete opposite. People confused, people not getting the proper education. How much of that do you believe is the decision a person makes to educate themselves, and also the responsibility of the state to provide the proper tools and education, especially knowing that these are the individuals that need the biggest investment to get out of that level of poverty?
I believe it comes down to the leadership, because your team is a reflection of how it's being led. So if you have a leader that's very lackadaisical, very nonchalant, who doesn't really prioritize education, health, sanitation, or investments, financial wellness to the community, real estate, then your entire city and its denizens are going to be a mere reflection of that too. Whereas then you have a leader who's outspoken, a little bit altruistic, assertive in their roles and what they feel, and as a voice for the people, then the people are going to more likely to have a little spark in them to fight for not only for themselves, for their leader, but for themselves. It gives them a sense to, it gives them a light to revitalize themselves, to see, maybe I can do something before, because like I had no one who mirrored or voiced how I felt. Now when I have that, I was like, okay, if they can do that and they came exactly similar where I'm from, then so can I. It will inspire you to want to be better. But if everyone around you is mediocre, then you're going to more likely fall in line into the mediocrity.
And you're a product of your environment, unfortunately, because not everyone have the proper mindset, the tools, also I would say the emotional background to withstand the storms of being resilient enough to move yourself out of a environment. But also, this plays a huge game in also learning from different environments, being exposed to different education, different systems, different places, different people, because that's going to broaden also your perspective about life. And somebody that have low resources don't have the opportunity to take and travel to another country to see what that looks like. They can't go on the regular to visit a museum or go and to a college that is going to, I will say, connect them to education, or have a tutor that can embrace their full potential and polish it. This is the sad part about where we at in terms of our educational system and society, is that are we doing enough is the question.
Exactly. And listen, I've had friends, family members, and peers and colleagues who have never left their hometown. Most of them, some have never went to college. Like that's one aspect. Some have never even left the state line. Some have never traveled outside of the country. Some don't have money. They'd be lucky if they have $500 in their savings account. Like most people, when you really look at it, are stuck. Most of them are stuck. And it's like, it's a very daunting thing to look at.
Yeah, it's daunting. It's scary because the country has a lot of resources, and it's just not distributed, fairly. I would say, fairly and better to, I would say, equilibrate, to balance the part of where society is stuck, to help them elevate. Because think about it, if we elevate our levels of education, that means our economy is going to be better. Mm-hmm. We're going to do better for ourselves. We're going to have less crime. We're going to have less incarceration. Our behaviors change because we are not now you're fighting or you're living with a purpose. And that's the biggest issue. I see a lot of individuals not having a legit purpose of what they want to do for their life and for themselves. Exactly. And when you don't have that, what is it that you go? You go back to the societal norm. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, I was waiting for you to say that, because also when you lack a purpose, it makes you more susceptible to easy forms of manipulation and agenda pieces, especially with the internet, when that is circulating throughout everywhere. It makes you more susceptible because you don't have a real life goal in mind. You have no sense of direction or purpose. Everyone else around you is either the same, or some have transcended where the societal standard of success was going to be at. So that's where the dangers of walking through life purposely and you're just in survivor's mode. You're just maintaining just to pay bills. That's the main danger of it, because it makes you a disposable pawn in someone else's agenda piece.
Oh my God, you hit it on the nail. And it's so funny because I was having my last podcast was about the U.S. immigration deportation crisis. And this is where you also start to see, like, for example, the podcast was intended to explain with fact what provokes people to leave their countries, and also what was the American perspective, correct? Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not taking any side. I'm just exposing fact. But as you can see, certain comments that I took the liberty to just, see curiosity, right? But not to respond, just to understand. And you see people take a stance to a political way or how they feel about it. And this is not about how you feel or what is your personal view. It's just these are facts. These are cold facts. But here's where we see also the level of education when we see a content. And now we don't understand the real intention behind what a content was made for. And I think that's where most people struggle, because again, if your reading level as a sixth grader, it's going to be very difficult for anyone to interpret what is the message. Think about reading Plato the Republic, and trying to understand that philosophy when you haven't reached a certain level of reading and comprehension.
Exactly.
What are your thoughts about this? Because also, and I want to lead you to this question too, is that we also believe that success is money. And you see that on Instagram, you see that on TikTok, people having a lavish lifestyle, cars, etc. But you can be more happy with having less and living a peaceful life. What are your takes on this?
I was hoping you bring this one up too. Okay, one, for that lavish lifestyle, that comes from a state of poverty. If you've never had anything in your life, the only thing you're going to strive for is that the moment you get that little bit of success, you're going to double down and try to obtain everything that you have never had before, and you'll go into a financial hole just to maintain that, just to achieve that, because for the first time in your life, you not only feel seen, you not only feel success, you're the first one in your entire family, in your friend group, in your town, in your culture, to gain this level of success is such a fast pace. It shows that you worked hard and you were diligent in this thing, but it also shows how easily we can get sucked into these things, especially when we're just only thinking about it from a monetary gain. And it's a societal gain where pretty much you're no longer the peon, the peasant, the pawn. You're now one of the upper echelons now, or what you assume to be the upper echelon. Because let me give you a perspective too. Bezos got money, Gates got money, Elon got money. You just a dude with a good job, hoping you still got one tomorrow. Because guess what? Especially you can get all that, you can make money, but how many of you can actually maintain it? How many of you can actually keep it for a long period of time and say you lose that cushy job, or your following on social media starts to plummet? What happens after that? That lifestyle becomes very risky to maintain because you don't have the funds to maintain it. But because you condition yourself, when you've been in for so long, it's hard to switch back to what you were physically. And also the other question you had was social media. We see that all the time, especially in the medical field and in the research section, because you have so many people who will try to do research on things that without really understanding the historical context, the scientific data, the vocabulary, and how research actually functions. They'll read something at face value without really understanding it, or they'll read an article or see a podcast or a video or two, and they'll think they're an expert. They'll think they got their third eye open to things, or they'll read think pieces or books with people who have the same implicit bias as them without really challenging their belief system, and they'll fall into that same rabbit hole again. And sometimes you got people in higher fields of education that fall into this trap too, that because of their own implicit bias without really being able how to separate them. That people are more susceptible to that than they realize.
No, indeed. And it's almost like if you read Nietzsche and you fall victim into his idealisms, that the man was brilliant, but the man was also had a lot of issues, right?
Exactly.
He had a lot of we can say he was a racist. We can say many other things from him, but we have to separate the brilliance from the man and the behavior and the ethics. And sometimes when we don't evaluate every category of a subject, we fall victim into what you're saying.
Exactly. Same thing with Marxism or people who read Machiavellian. I was like, you got to be very careful with that. It's come on surface of it's very thought-provoking. Nietzsche, Siegfried, you have to be very careful with them. But because people's own personal bias leaks into their work as well, especially in a historical context too. You gotta be very careful with that. On the surface, it looks great, but there's deeper levels of it that you may not even realize about it.
Yeah, and these concepts can be influential if you're not careful. You know, when I read or when I study any of these great philosophers and psychologists and scientists, I ask myself, I want to learn, but if I was to give a lecture about these individuals, that's the kind of mindset I approach. Because when you provide a lecture, it's not about how you feel about the content or how the audience feel. It's about the real facts. What are the facts? What was this person in his essence and what was he trying to achieve in his professional and personal life. And I think that has helped me to become and avoid being biased, because I give you a good example. I'm a Christian, and when I did a podcast about Christ, I was like, well, I want to speak about just the Jesus as the human, not the God, right? So it's hard to keep yourself, because you have a personal attachment, a personal belief, to keep yourself separate. But what helped was that it's like, well, if I'm giving a lecture and I have no sort of understanding of who this person is, that's the approach I need to have in order to give the proper insight of this content. Do you believe, because you spoke about social media, how often do you see an approach like this on social media? Because I do hear a lot of times also, it makes me laugh. 5 things to do to stop anxiety. And I'm like,
yes. I see this all the time. People, how to deal with stress, anxiety, how to lose weight. There's always a new trend, a new idea. Hold on, just give me 1 second, because I want to charge my computer real quick. Just 1 second.
No, go ahead. Take your time, man.
Wait, hold on. It's just like,
take your time, brother.
Thank you.
No. It's funny because you get to see how there's so much misinformation out there, and we're always looking for the easy repair, the quick solution. We're not looking to put in the real effort to not understand how to navigate through something, but also understand ourselves a little bit better. One of the biggest things about psychology is understanding fear, how to cope with fear, how to use that as a tool, what can you learn from fear, and also why is that fear there? And in your criterion, what are your thoughts about the misinformation, the easy fixes, and how people are handling fear?
Yeah, because it gives you a sense of control. Especially, again, it goes back to what we discussed earlier. When you don't have a sense of purpose, you will fall into something so quickly because it gives you a sense of meaning, purpose, and control. When you don't have no purpose, you don't feel like you have any control over your life. You don't have any sense of purpose. You don't have a sense of meaning, fulfillment, joy. You're just wandering aimlessly through life. You just feel like if you just blew away to the wind, no one would even care if you lived or died. And that's scary for some people to feel. And I've said this too in my presentations. Pride, fear, and ego are the main things that stop people from reaching their full potential. And you have to be willing to, you have to humble yourself to realize you don't know everything. And sometimes you're going to be in settings where you're not going to be the superstar. You're going to be the supporting cast member. Everyone has their role. Everyone has a duty that needs to fulfill for that particular mission, for that goal, that project. You have to be able to understand that you can't be the star all the time. You can be the star of your own story, but for a great aspect of life itself, you are not the star. You have a role and a duty. And I feel like we've also gotten away, because we're so hyper individualistic, we got away from a sense of humility to realize we have to be cooperative as a team to actually build a better future. And another thing I've realized, a lot of times that comes from a state of trauma and when no one ever truly cultivated you or really helped you, and you had to do a lot of these things by yourself. It's hard for you to really trust anyone else to do the process, because like I did it myself. I can't trust someone to do things that I want done. Listen, sometimes you got to realize sometimes your way may not be the best way, because if it was, your life would have been so much better, right? But even when people who are hyper individualistic, there's still there's still something that's missing in them, a sense of belonging. And that's another thing, especially with humans, and particularly men too. We fall into these agenda pieces and all these pseudo intellectuals, these radical extremist mindsets, because we feel like we don't belong anywhere. And like you fall in these small little communities, you feel like you feel a sense of belonging and community that you never got before. It's the easy fix, especially with the internet now. It makes it much easier for you to find people who can relate to you, who sound and act familiar to you. But it's like, but here's the thing, they get you nice and softly. They don't hit you with the big stuff immediately, but slowly they give you small little nuggets until they start getting bigger and bigger, to the point where like, yes, you don't question it because you've already been introduced to it very early on. So like, you don't see nothing different of it.
Yeah. and this a lot of what you're talking promotes a lot of shame and guilt, which is what a lot of people that don't know how to deal with these cognitive, emotional realities, right? It also provokes the fact, like you were saying, this sense of belonging. Like, and humility is very hard to accomplish when you don't understand what it is to become a support system and that somebody becomes a support system for you. Humility is very hard to accomplish when the ego and the pride is elevated, because we believe that we are constantly competing, but against whom? The competition has to be within yourself. You as an individual, how are you being a better human being? How are you learning more every day? How are you treating yourself with dignity? Because if you do this with self, and you provoke self-respect, self-responsibility, self-discipline, self-love, then you could definitely apply these things elsewhere. But the issue is, a lot of people want to apply it with everyone else, but not apply it with themselves. So every therapy starts with self. Stop thinking about what others think. Stop thinking about what the Jonases are doing. It doesn't matter what they did, because at the end of the day, you can't influence the decisions they make. And yes, you can tell them, but sometimes people already made a decision before making a decision. Exactly. So this is why it's so important that we have to decide for ourselves first to be a benefactor and be beneficial to society. I wanted to ask you, in this great humble approach of your professional career, it's like, what is the future looking for you? What is it that you want to continue in?
Well, there's three. I want to be able to continue a sense in the scientific field. I want to make some aspect of me being an impact to the science field, where it's in through my career with helping fellow coworkers, colleagues, whereas it's bringing the next generation into my field to show like the benefits of science and healthcare. The other is through education. I want to be an advocate for education, because education opens the doors for you that some things you cannot do by yourself, and something that even the internet can help you with. Because there's education in different formats. It's more than just going to school. It's apprenticeships, it's internships, it's guidance. It's like you have, and also teaching people the sense through my actions as being a disciple and an advocate for genuine kindness. Because like I will also go back to what you were saying before, but with shame and guilt, also with it goes with nice and kindness too. Because like you're saying, guilt is more acknowledging your behavior and realizing it's bad and feeling bad. Shame is the belief that you are bad. Is that you genuinely believe that you are bad, you're no good, and you don't deserve anything else. And a lot of people are stuck in that shame mindset to the point where it's like they can't get out of it. And I remember I have been in that cycle for a majority of my life too. In my younger years, like I've gotten better. I can still work on it, but I know where that comes from. You don't believe that you're worthy of it subconsciously, even though your outlook or your external factors say like, "Oh no, I don't feel like that at all." But your internal monologue is saying something to me very differently, and then it translates into your actions, especially in how you treat other people. Because here's another thing I don't like. I don't like when people say, "Oh, I'm a kind individual." I'm a very empathetic. I don't do that. Listen, if you're kind and empathetic, you don't got to keep saying it over and over again. It just shows. And this is another thing too. People don't know how to decipher the difference between nice and kindness. Nice is transactional. Nice is helps you get to be able to converse with people. Kindness is something you just are, or you just generally do. It's just being genuine with it. And sometimes when you've been in hostile environments for so long, the first nice thing someone does for you, it's like gold to you and you treasure it. When it is like to them, that's just a common thing they do. Genuine kindness, you don't have to get rewards. Niceness, you expect a reward in the process of it without you even realizing it, intentionally or not intentionally.
Yeah, and normally people say what they wish to accomplish most of the times, and they don't take, there's always like the inaction to do it. And like you said, perhaps because they don't believe in themselves or they expect a reward. And I wanted to ask you something outside of the behavioral field that we have beautifully put together. You have been on the money. I have this question that it has to do with science. And since you have your expertise is in this, why are viruses so lethal? And what are their common behaviors, if there's any?
Ooh, yes. So viruses, unlike bacteria, which are organic, viruses are inorganic. And their thing is like they're able to bypass a cell's internal structure, hijack it, invade it, replicate inside of them, hijack the entire cell, and then kill it from the inside to be able to proliferate and just reproduce more and more and more. And pretty much the body, even though we have cells that tackle viruses, some, like say for HIV, they do something called reverse transcript, where pretty much the best way I can describe reverse transcript is like,
I understand that like the HIV virus cuts the communication of the immune system, and that's what provokes confusion, I guess.
Yeah, it's just replicating its own genetics through a certain mechanism.
So almost like an Agent Smith.
In a sense, yeah. It's switching from DNA to RNA, and most cells recognize DNA. With HIV, it was very prolific, and it was able to change its own genetic structure, be able to hijack a cell, and be able to grow expeditiously. And that's how viruses work. And nowadays, with certain medications and viruses being able to look at these medications and adapt to them. That's the one thing about microorganisms that's very interesting. Since they've been around for billions of years, they have mastered the skill of adaptability. They can adapt in any environment, whether it's a hot, steamy environment, like in a geyser, or in a cold, wet environment, like inside your basement. That's how mold can proliferate. That's a fungi. Or some proliferate in, like most bacteria, in room temperature, like say in a human body, or in any other surfaces or dirty surfaces. Here's the thing. What do you think is more dirty? Your cell phone or a toilet?
I would put my money on the cell phone because it's everywhere.
You're constantly touching your phone, and you're constantly with it everywhere. So you have a plethora of bacteria and viruses on your phone, and you don't even realize it. Now, there are good bacteria like your skin flora, what's on your cell. That pretty much, that's the first layer of protection you have against foreign entities coming in, and your gut microbiome, the bacteria that you have in your stomach. And I did research on this back in grad school, where pretty much not only does your gut bacteria helps regulate your digestive system, it helps with your neurological system, it helps with your mood, and it helps with your sleep cycle too. And it's like, when you have an irregular environment with your gut microbiome, it will show in not only your behavior, your sleep cycle, your metabolism, and made you more susceptible to more neurological diseases too, and also affects your liver, creating something called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
So we could say that viruses not only learn how to be adaptable, but they go in through mutation periods of completely, like you said, hijacking and recreating itself, but changing the DNA to RNA. That's fascinating because it's a clever way of being a spy, I guess.
Exactly.
Turning it against you.
And your body will think it's just another cell, not realizing it got taken over. But it's like, to me, the kings of hijacking an organism and just growing from there are parasites. They're the kings of that. They master that. But here's the thing about parasites. They can't survive on their own. They need a host in order to survive. Same with a virus. A virus cannot exist outside the body for more than, say, like 24 or 48 hours. After that, because without it, they'll die.
So this is why they look for the host, and perhaps this is why it's so hard to get rid of them as well.
Exactly, because they spread so sparsely.
So they migrate everywhere and anywhere that's possible, where is best suited for them.
Exactly.
So, well, let me ask you, what questions do you have for the podcast? And at the end, we always leave for you to give us your thoughts about the podcast. What do you like? And also a question you would like to leave for the next guest.
I like the podcast. It keeps an open dialogue of questions, like asking, what are your thoughts on what you think about a certain issue? It's a stress-free environment where you don't feel like you're being tackled, or you don't feel like you're being pressed against. Like, say if you're doing a television interview, you gotta ask specific questions and you have to perform a certain way. But it's still good. It's still happening. But I like this format. And like, based on how we're talking about everything, my question is, how would you teach the young generation how to implement short-term and long-term goals that they can follow suit? And how do you build the mental discipline that they'll need to implement these goals. And pretty much, what would you say to a person who is walking through life aimlessly and developing a purpose?
Well, those are two good questions. I think the first one, if we're treating a child at a younger age, we can use science to actually have them see the repercussion of short and long-term commitment to see something grow. For example, you can make a science experiment in school, right? Where you are going to plant a seed to see something grow, a plant grow, right? It's not going to grow every day, the next day. You have to work on it. You have to, pour water to it. You got to give it the proper nutrients, proper lighting. I do think that when we expose our children to see what commitment does and what you see afterwards, it definitely develops the sense of not only belonging to grow, but you also see it. You see the real fact of a seed that was so minuscule grow into a bigger plant. Yes. And you see the end result. The issue is we are very tangible. Most of us are very visible. We always want proof. But how can you teach this kind of simple exercise that should be done at 4 or 5 years old when they're 20, 25? It's very difficult because now they're in survival mode already. They have a lot of stress and they're living day by day on how to survive and maintaining their survival mode. But if you teach this at a young age, you teach them that, for example, if you want to run faster, they're in gym practice, let's teach you how to run faster and with real data, right? Look, you ran at 8.0. Look, your hard work in 2 weeks, now you're running at a 7.5. Look at your progress. And I do think that in order to do this at a young age, we need to also implement psychological education at that early age so people can have a better formation of their criterion, but also understand their emotions.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about emotions like a flashcard, this is sadness, a flashcard, this is anger. Those are very good because at that age you need to identify. But now we have to also teach them how to utilize what they feel to make better decisions for themselves at such a young age. Like, give you a good example. A child upset because they got a bad grade. Okay, that's a consequence of they're not preparing, right? Now, take them to the side and don't have them talk immediately because a lot of people react to their emotions. Teach them on how to be non-reactive and more self-reflective. Give them like a time. It's like, hey, I want you to be sitting there for 10 minutes. When you finish those 10 minutes, let's talk about your results. How does that make you feel? And now by giving them a moment to isolate, to analyze content better, they're able to say, well, I feel upset, and they will give you a better explanation of why. And also the reflection of the question will be like, well, did you study enough to get a better result? And if the student says, I tried as hard as I could, then it's a teacher issue. Then the teacher has to do a better job with the mother to nurture the proper education so the child can learn, and vice versa. If the child says no, then we know that where the root of the problem is and why this is causing the emotional standby. But also now we could say, okay, let's talk to the parent and let's change that behavior, right? But if these things are not taken at such a young age, we will have and develop emotional disorders.
Yep, that's very true. And it's like these needs learn how to reflect and regulate versus react and respond, because that's going to save you in a long time. Because a lot of times, especially when you're young, is when you have volatile emotions, you tend to react, especially with violence, and that can steer you down a tumultuous path to the point where it's like it's very hard to recover from that. And you have to. It's like you can't. Not everyone's a rabbit. Sometimes you got to move like a turtle. And that's my philosophy in life. For years, I tried to be like the rabbit, the hare. And I was like, you're the turtle. When you take your time with things and when you take it nice and slow, then everything becomes much easier to regulate and to understand. Like my mother always used to say to me, this is the quote I've learned since I was like 5 years old: organization and preparation is the key to success. And I've used that every single day. And whenever I go to school, when I work, Where do I do the seminars, and where even to my own personal life. And like, you have to have a balance, but you got to be able to know how to handle it when you're in these situations, because a lot of young people, even older people, don't know how to handle these things. The emotions handle them.
Exactly. And to answer your second question about somebody that doesn't have a purpose, a lot of people that don't have purpose don't have self-love for themselves. They believe that love is an emotion, but love is a decision you make for yourself every day. So a lot of them also have a lot of untreated trauma. So you have to navigate through those untreated traumas to understand how this untreated trauma developed their lost identity. Because once they understand where they really are and why they think the way they think and why they haven't been able to heal, think about it. How difficult it is to go through life with a wound, with an open wound, where you've been, and I'm talking about metaphysically, bleeding, right?
Yep.
Bleeding internally, nobody sees it, but yet you portray a persona that everything is fine, that you're tough, that you're hustling, and that you're this big guy or big woman. But in reality, you're calling for help, but you don't want to showcase your vulnerability. It has to start from, let's heal the wound. Let's understand what hurt you. So with that, let's build your identity. Let's understand, but let's create healthy boundaries. Let's create healthy boundaries that will help you reach your personal, professional, and emotional goals as well. Let's try to develop a strategy where your decisions are constructive, but are based about obtaining peace for you and for others. So it's a long process. I'm not going to say, yes, it takes one session and you should be done. It could take years, right? And I want to be honest, it's an ever outgoing process, because in life you will always face challenges that you never experienced and that you have to learn how to navigate through them and cope with them, and also make these experiences an ally. So, but to start, you have to start the trauma and healing, and then build the identity from there. And it's very important. I reiterate this: creating healthy boundaries for yourself is perhaps the best way of loving yourself, because that way you will understand when something is so intrusive that you can't even handle it, but yet you allow it. Then you can't accuse the other person. You are responsible for having that and taking that responsibility of others being intrusive about what you allow them to be.
Exactly.
So I do think because of that, we don't have a big sense of self-responsibility, which makes us, especially when we're wounded, we don't know who hurt us or what hurt us. We start blaming the world, but yet we don't take responsibility on how to heal.
Yeah. After a while, you stop becoming a victim and you become a perpetrator.
That's the worst, because you see the effect of being the perpetrator, because now everyone is a target. Everyone becomes a target: the system, the government, mom, dad. At some point in your life, you become an adult, and your decisions are what took you to where you are. And if you don't realize that, then you will be hurting yourself even more, because you're creating fictional, I would say, enemies. And don't get me wrong, there's people that hurt you in the past, but you have to heal from that. Nothing is going to change the fact that what hurt you in the past happened, and it's a truth and it's a fact. But you also have to continue living.
Yes.
You have to continue to learn how to carry that cross and keep going.
And that's always the hardest part, is the first step to really realizing, acknowledging that, and just, you have to move forward. You have to keep moving forward, but also learning from it.
Yeah. And sometimes the responsibility of carrying your traumas is going to feel weightless, and sometimes it's going to be heavy. But you also have to understand, what are you doing to lighten up the baggage, right? Are you going to the gym? Are you socializing with your friends? Are you going out with your family, eating properly? Exactly. Seeing your doctor. Or you could be all day sitting down depressed, and that's a choice. It's a personal choice you make for yourself, So, but don't get me wrong, depression it's a very harsh feeling that neglects you as a human being. It's like you forget that you exist.
Exactly. And even the most successful people are susceptible to it. No one is impervious from it. No matter how much good habits we have, we are all susceptible because like after a while, sometimes we do lose ourselves in the mix. But it's also important to be able to acknowledge it, realize it, and then act on it.
Yeah, and fear, right? Fear is one of the biggest factors of why we react in these ways, because we just don't learn from fear. But also like choosing love, choosing grace are two fundamental things to free yourself from a lot of the pain. Because at the end of the day, if you're conflictive, if you're somebody that's always arguing, it's debilitating, it's exhausting. At some point, exactly, it's draining. At some point, you got to ask yourself, is this worth doing? What am I winning by doing all of this, creating all this drama? And you have to ask yourself those questions. It's not so much about how you feel, it's about how is this helping you be at peace with yourself and understand yourself better.
Exactly. And it's like, the more you do this, the more you end up pushing away the ones who actually love you and who actually want to be in your life. That's going to end up killing you in the long run.
Indeed. And it's a silent killer, because it's a killer that lives like you said, like a virus that hijacks you and it sabotages you, but yet it influences you to stay in it.
Yep.
Because because what happens is you're by creating all these defensive mechanisms, you don't want to let anything in or out.
The things that come in can help you, while the things inside, you don't want anything outside coming in, but the things inside you are the very thing that's killing you.
Exactly. It's like a fist, right? In order for you to receive something, you got to open your hand, and to give, you got to open your hand. But if you are like a fist, you're always defensive. There's no way of getting something out and receiving the good and taking the bad out. And it's impossible. It's a decision at the end of the day.
And you have to be willing to make a hard decision. Look yourself in the mirror saying, who am I? What am I? What do I want? Do I want to be better? Or do I want to stay exactly the way I am? And is me being better, or better yet, is whatever I'm about to make any situation I live in very better? It's just like, do I care enough about myself to want to be better?
And and the most dangerous thing is justifying our actions because of how we feel. And this is something that we fall victim to very easily, because it's easy to justify your emotions, and even if you make the wrong decisions. So this is critical that we learn psychological education from an early age. Because the number one question we should ask ourselves when we make a decision is, can you deal with the consequences? Have you thought about all the possible consequences? And if you're able to handle them, do it. And if you're not, don't. But if you do and know the consequences that you can deal with it, understand that you will suffer. And that's the price to pay, but just be responsible with your actions, correct? So I wanted to ask you, what will be the question you would like to leave for the next guest?
The question I will ask for the next guest is, when does a responsibility and accountability come into play, in the beginning or when you mess up?
That's a good question. It's a lot of self-reflection, and for the person that comes in, which it's unknown yet, but we will probably have somebody soon, that's a very thought-provoking question that we hope that you take it with grace. And also you teach us what does that look for you? What accountability and responsibility looks for you, how you process it. So Zakee, I really value your time. We got to do an in-person too. And I told you around February, we're going to definitely do an in-person. And I'm very thankful to have you in the podcast. Thank you so much for your time. And we hope that we met your expectation, and that, we continue working together, because this is not just like a one-if. We're going to probably work together and develop better advocacy for education.
Yes, absolutely. I would be happy to come in anytime you want me to, and then talk more about it, and also be an advocate for people, for education and science, and just anything. Like, I would love to be a helping hand.
Well, I will see you next time, guys. And thank you so much for viewing the podcast. You can always support it with your subscription. But more importantly is, what are your major takeaways about today's podcast? And if you have any questions for our guest, please feel free to leave them, and I will send them to him, and he will be helpful enough to help us respond. Thank you so much, and Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Wendell. Thank you. Thank you for having me on your podcast. And it was a wonderful time to have a very thought-provoking conversation. I hope to see you next time. Peace. Have a good day.
You too. No, but we had fun, man. Oh, what? Welcome back again, Ethics Go Podcast, where we explore human experiences. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do not forget our campaign. We are committed to transform your subscriptions into pro bono programs for mental health. So you can free somebody's mind from their traumas and help them heal just by subscribing. Very simple, and it costs absolutely nothing. Help us through this campaign, and we just want to pay forward, not only to our viewers, but for those that can't afford mental health services. Just remember, the statistics are real. Only 4 out of 10 Americans can afford mental health services. So help us change that. Hopefully, we can move the statistics and perhaps move it from 4 to 5 out of 10 people have good mental health services.
Let's start.